Trump supporters voted for the guy on the basis that he was going to fix the economy and make their lives better, and he hasn't delivered on any of it. Americans are struggling now more than ever, and Trump has done nothing to make it better. He has only made it worse. So with that in mind, I got recommended a video called "The Richest Country is Pretty Mid Now" by a YouTuber named Ben Jordan. I thought we'd give it a watch because I think it just has the conversation I think we've all been wanting to have, that as much as Donald Trump sucks for every reason we already know, he really has just destroyed the economy. Like the struggling that everybody's been dealing with unanimously, that's been growing in how much everyone's talking about, is blatant, and it's because of Trump and his fuck-ups. So let's learn about the effect it's having.
You noticed it too, haven't you? We've been exposed to controversies and warnings and just nonstop bad news our entire lives, but this hits different. Beneath all of these chaotic headlines that we see every single day, it just feels like something bigger is happening.
Do me a favor. Try and think of just one general thing in your life that has improved in the last 10 years. Has your quality of healthcare improved? How about your quality of education? Your cost of living, your insurance coverage, your privacy, your freedom? Do you have more time to do what you want to do today than you did in 2016?
On this day, 1 decade ago, the Dow Jones
closed
at around 18,000 points.
That is an effective cut. Oh my lord, the giant-ass rooster.
In 2016?
On this day, 1 decade ago, the Dow Jones closed at around
18,000
points. Since then, it has skyrocketed, closing today at 51,000 points. So congratulations, unless of course your quality of life is not 2.83 times better. In that case, I made a video for you to watch. But this video isn't about evil CEOs or how capitalism and wealth inequality are out of control. You probably already knew those things. This is a theory, maybe a conspiracy theory, but a theory nonetheless that I've been sharing and discussing and refining for years. For you, it's merely some lenses that you can try on when reading your newsfeed. It's an introduction to what comes after capitalism, something I can only call leverageism.
Interesting. Oh, this is gonna be copyrighted. I do think it's important not to try and blame all of what we're going through right now on the idea that capitalism is like a flawed system that fails inevitably in the end, which it is, but that's not why things are so bad as they are right now. This is Donald Trump being incompetent. He is not a good leader. He is not smart. He is not a secret pro-America Machiavellian leader. He's not playing 4D chess. He's not chess. He's not even a supervillain level intellect. He's a dumbass. He is genuinely just a dumbass who is trying to keep his crowd, his cult happy. He's grifting money off of his supporters and manipulating the system to enrich himself. Nothing he does is actually doing anything for America. Nothing he does is competent at all. There are no adults in the room. That is why everything is falling apart.
Capitalism, on paper, is dependent on economic and technological growth. On paper, the idea is that everybody gets a slice of the pie, and if we make a really, really, really big pie that keeps growing, then everybody can get fat. And not only is that example kind of a literal one when we look at the American obesity epidemic, but capitalism also led to agricultural innovation and global supply chains and wealth creation in developing countries that played a huge part in decreasing global hunger. It's worth recognizing that in 1970, 1/3 of the people on this planet were starving.
I mean, like, the fact is, a lot of leftists are their heart's in the right place, but there is sort of a demonization of capitalism that's kind of odd, because capitalism, I think most leftist writers, particularly Marx, argued that capitalism was a step towards the inevitability of socialism, that capitalism was just an improvement upon mercantilism and other former forms of economy, if you could even call them that, and that this is just the most free and individualistic form that's existed, but at the end of the day, it's not perfect. Like, it's weird how much capitalism gets demonized when, as flawed as it is, it's an improvement from what came before it, and it's a good stepping stone for socialism, or to get to socialism. Like, to be fair, capitalism did help a lot of countries become first world developed countries, the highest quality of life there is, so there's definitely a factor there of considering capitalism more of a transition, a liminal political system, or I guess economic system, rather than something that should be solidified and perfected.
and now that number is down to about 8.2%. How much of that achievement can be awarded to capitalism can be debated, but ignoring that this drop in famine happened in a time when all but 4 countries rely on a capitalist structure would be disingenuous.
Let's revisit that on-paper part. So, like, even if we limit our examples to Coca-Cola, who I seem to frequently use for economic examples for some reason, capitalism leads to a lot of evil shit. In 1954, Coca-Cola financially and politically supported a CIA-backed military coup of Guatemala. Then,
is it the Banana Republics thing?
in the early 2000s, Coca-Cola was suspected to have hired right-wing paramilitary death squads to assassinate union leaders.
Coca-Cola is the #1 top plastic polluter in the world, despite their constant marketing of their sustainability goals.
I honestly think the best example of what wealthy business owners are capable of when it comes to evil is the practice of slavery in America. Every wealthy business owner in the South who could afford slaves got slaves. They bought slaves. They had no quarrels about the idea of having people be their slaves. White, black, didn't matter. They would take slaves regardless. Now, granted, dehumanizing black people made it real easy for them to do all of what they did. But the fact that American business owners, American wealthy people, back in the early days of America, were willing to enslave large amounts of other human beings and torture them as punishment if they didn't work hard enough or didn't follow an order, any number of these things. I know we think of slavery oftentimes as this racially driven thing, but fundamentally the idea of enslaving another person or a group of people in general is an economic thing. Like, it is somebody with wealth and power who does not want to have to pay even a small fraction of their wealth to their workers, who has decided, you know what? What if I just enslave them and threaten them and they work to live? Otherwise, they die. That is what many wealthy, powerful people in America would be doing if they could. And we know that because when they could, they did.
Caused water shortages in Latin America and India by depleting local aquifers. They have bottling partners that have been repeatedly accused of human rights violations and suppressing union organization. They have Israeli franchises that have sourced their resources from occupied Palestinian territories, which is considered illegal under international law. Is the existence of capitalism the problem here? Most progressive people would answer that question with a resounding yes. I think it's debatable. I would argue that most of these things that Coke did violate the rules written by capitalist governments, and the problem is greed, which is a byproduct of jealousy. Since capitalism is frequently associated with hoarding more resources than your neighbors, we tend to associate capitalism with being a douchebag, and that's totally fair. So much so that we even get popular memes and fake.
No, he's totally right. He's totally right. The problem is capitalism is an easily exploitable, fragile system that the longer it lasts, the more the worst of society with the least morals and the least desire to play fair start to accumulate wealth and consolidate it, and the more the rest of society suffers, and it gets to be a real problem over time. And that's why the term late-stage capitalism exists. For when such a small group of people have all the capital, the working class isn't able to break into that capital class anymore, which was the whole point of capitalism, was to be able to go from a working class person to a capital owner in your lifetime with just some hard work and smart planning. That was the whole idea of it. That was the American dream, in fact. But now you can't do that anymore. And now you can hardly even get a college degree and then use said degree to find a job anymore. That is late-stage capitalism. The resources are running thin because there's not enough left for everybody. And I say this in a very tongue-in-cheek way. Like, obviously, there's enough resources for everybody left over, but it's a matter of who can afford what, prices are rising, global trade is being disrupted by war and conflict.
Karl Marx quotes like, "There is no ethical consumption under capitalism," which is a completely sane and reasonable thing to shout at lemonade stands and farmers markets. The reason I'm discussing this to begin with is to highlight what American capitalism means on paper, and how apparently nobody has seen that paper in decades. One thing that I regret not covering enough in my last video was what happened between the Great Depression and the 2000s. Let's go back to 1933, and I think we need a whole tone scale for this. Hey, I'm in 1933. Shit sucked. Nobody has any money. I've been eating shit like dandelions and potato soup and a bunch of poorly thought out ways to eat hot dogs. All this happened because a bunch of people got really greedy and borrowed more money than they could ever pay back and invested it in wheat. What is the deal with that? Franklin D. Roosevelt's administration was both aware of capitalism's potential to increase the American
What fucked us, weevils?
quality of life, but also its potential to cannibalize itself. And it is truly remarkable to me that nearly 100 years ago, they saw the exact same mechanism that's playing out today. And this was at a time when some of your baseball watching and apple pie eating Americans were still on the fence about communism, and they had solid representation via the CPUSA. A lot of American citizens believed that the Soviet Union was a rising egalitarian society that was immune to the Western economic crisis that they were experiencing. The New Deal took this into serious consideration, and ultimately wasn't about social services or directly addressing wealth inequality like the Soviet Union, but instead about sticking to the whole freedom thing and redefining capitalism in a way that would allow Americans to organically solve these problems using their own capitalist motivations. All of this kicked off with the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933. No longer would a commercial bank that provided consumer and business loans be allowed to deal with, underwrite, or invest in private securities. And
I'm not 100% sure what he said earlier about the Americans' perspective on the Soviet Union being pretty positive before, like, the era of demonizing communism, because I think just as a state, with poor leadership, people kind of looked down on the USSR back then. Wasn't that around the time when, like, the USSR was starving itself? Could be wrong, but I just know that there's been a long stint of before the fall of the USSR of it having very incompetent leadership. Or maybe not incompetent, but not great. Like, even pre-Stalin, that's what I'm talking about, pre-Stalin, because that's when this was, the 1930s. Yeah, like, I'm pretty sure their leadership wasn't immensely competent then, but I could be wrong. The problems might have began with Stalin, but I don't think they did.
Investment banks would no longer be able to take consumer deposits. So to give you an example, JP Morgan was forced to start a separate business for all the risky stuff, and that eventually became Morgan Stanley. This act also created the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or FDIC. This guaranteed that if you had money in a commercial bank and that bank failed or went out of business, you would be guaranteed reimbursement up to a specified limit. All of this, combined with a whole lot of historically progressive labor laws and a tiny little skirmish called World War II, set America up to make the most savvy financial move in the history of trade. You know those crazy conspiracy stories where the elite Illuminati members will meet up somewhere in the woods and decide how they'll...
Wait. Now, they aren't elite Illuminati members or anything like that, but there is a group of elites that get together for a LARP cult. It's not a real cult, probably, and I don't think they're worshiping any actual supernatural concepts. I don't even think they believe in anything there, but I think it's a LARP, like a fun little thing they do, where a bunch of only male, powerful, wealthy people, including past presidents, multiple past presidents, I think, go to this forest, I think somewhere in Oregon or Washington, if I were to guess, maybe Northern California, somewhere where the trees are massive, like this, the big redwoods and sequoias, and they build a giant owl effigy, light a bonfire, and hold an event there. It's called Bohemian Grove. Yes. And it's real. I went my whole life thinking it was a complete made-up conspiracy thing, and then I found out, oh, it absolutely is real. But it's probably not this, like, Freemason secret society type thing. It seems more like an exclusive LARP club. Yeah, Alex Jones broke into it, and he said he saw demons, but obviously I don't believe that. Anyway.
Control the world. That actually kind of happened. And to some degree, the economic fate of you and your family was decided in that meeting. Towards the end of the Second World War in July of 1944, delegates from 44 Allied nations met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, with the goal of designing and negotiating a post-war financial system. At the time, pretty much...
Yeah, so there are a lot of conspiracy theories that tie to this. I'm sure he's going to touch on it, but it involves the Titanic.
The entire world was economically devastated, but due to our size and geographic isolation, American soil was mostly untouched by the war. We also held between 70 and 80% of the world's gold reserves and were easily the largest manufacturing economy on the planet. The Bretton Woods Compromise offered a way that countries could facilitate international trade with a trusted currency without having to lug literal bars of gold everywhere. The United States pegged the US dollar strictly to gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce, and it was guaranteed that any foreign bank could turn in $35 and receive a physical ounce of gold from Fort Knox. Then every other nation in this agreement pegged their individual currency to the US dollar, which was then used exclusively for trading commodities such as oil with one another. Normally, if a country spends more money than it takes in, their currency and spending power would devalue, which would cause domestic inflation. But now, the world would need to use US dollars to conduct any form of trade, and over time, the US started printing more and more dollars to import commodities like consumer goods and oil from other nations without...
This is why globalism should not be demonized. This is why globalism, when conservatives talk about how bad it is and everything, they're so stupid, and they are so wrong. Globalism is how America became the most powerful country in the world, and how North America became the most powerful continent on the planet.
without having to worry about the US dollar losing value. Another advantageous side effect of this was a unique type of stagnation. While watching America go on a shopping spree, other nations realized that their US dollars would lose value just sitting in a vault somewhere, so their safest option at the time was to buy US Treasury bonds. This created and inflated an extraordinary global demand for US government debt, allowing us to borrow money for absurdly low interest rates to fund our infrastructure and become the most powerful military in the history of the world. By the late 1960s, the world started losing confidence in this system. Economists like Milton Friedman and Robert Triffin saw this as a flawed and dangerous.
I think at the same time, we were also the world's #1 manufacturer, if I'm not mistaken.
Economic rule set. One of the US gold standard's sharpest critics was French President Charles de Gaulle, who frequently publicly condemned the monetary system, calling it an exorbitant privilege. And de Gaulle called the US out on their bluff and demanded to trade massive amounts of US dollars for American gold. Between 1963 and 1966, 24 secret boat trips supervised by the French Navy and several flights crossed the Atlantic Ocean, carrying back a total of 3,313 tons of gold from America. This would be worth nearly $500 billion today. After printing and spending incredible...
Dude, imagine if it was like back in the day and some big hurricane hit and just swept those ships out to sea and sunk them, and now in the middle of the North Atlantic, there's just tons of gold bars somewhere. It's like, oh man, why couldn't it be in some nice, warm, shallow Caribbean water like those Spanish ships with the gold coins?
Incredibly reckless amounts of money on the Vietnam War, the American government knew that the jig was up. The wild conspiracy theory that the American dollar wasn't actually in parity with American gold was now a frequent public discussion by international leaders. Nobody knows how far out of parity gold and US dollar was, but it wouldn't exactly be a stretch of the imagination to think that if England or Japan or any other large nation decided to cash in their currency like France did, there'd be no more gold left to give them. So instead, on August 15th, 1971, President Nixon addressed the nation and told Americans that they were, in fact, the victims of the Bretton Woods Agreement.
The speculators have been waging an all-out war on the American dollar.
Ah.
I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury...
Guys, you don't understand. They're not after me. They're after you. I'm just in their way. Classic.
to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators.
He ambiguously villainized and referred to West Germany and Japan as international speculators and accused them of creating economic crises to rob money from Americans. He drew vague parallels between himself and Franklin D. Roosevelt, and he announced a new deal of his own. In order to protect Americans from these international speculators, the US dollar, the currency in which world trade almost exclusively took place, would no longer be backed by gold or anything tangible.
If you are among the overwhelming majority of Americans, your dollar will be worth just as much tomorrow as it is today.
Over the next few years, the inflation rate of the US dollar doubled, and the US and most of the Western world entered into a severe recession. OPEC, or the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, tried to price oil against gold to create international economic stability, but this led to even less stability. This made previous oil production complications much worse, and oil prices quadrupled from $3 per barrel to $12 per barrel overnight, and by the end of the decade, crude oil prices skyrocketed by roughly 1,000%. As a result, gas stations could no longer afford to resupply their storage tanks, and in many places, Americans would spend entire days waiting to fill up their vehicles. In the North, many people reverted to heating their homes with wood-burning stoves, and in an effort to save fuel, Nixon ordered that the maximum speed limit be set to 55 miles per hour nationwide. This led to truckers going on strike, and they started coordinating via citizen band radios, inventing their own slang and terms to confuse law enforcement. Many of those who were on strike spent their time slashing tires, shooting trucks, and dropping cinder blocks from bridges on non-participating truck drivers. More than a few people were killed over these disputes, and the entire country suffered enormous supply chain disruptions. And then Nixon had another one of his brilliant ideas. In 1973, he signed a bill extending daylight savings time to last the entire year. As violent crime rates rose to the highest...
That's like the kind of thing Trump would do. We gotta get people working more to fix the economy. Daylight savings time all year now. Get to work. No bed.
Point in recorded American history, and children walked to school in total darkness because there was not enough fuel for their school bus. Americans rightfully started wondering if the people in charge had no fucking idea what they were doing. But it would turn out that some people, like Treasury Secretary William Simon, did know what they were doing. He would take top-secret trips to Saudi Arabia to negotiate another deal that would give the American economy the asymmetrical leverage it needed to become whole again. In 1974, the US and Saudi Arabia quietly forged an alliance. It was not announced to the public or foreign leaders, but was conducted as a highly calculated and secretive economic handshake. The Saudi kingdom, who was by far the top oil producer in the world, agreed to price and sell every drop of its crude oil exports exclusively in US dollars. And because the entire world needed oil to industrialize, every nation on Earth was suddenly forced to build up massive reserves of US dollars just to continue operating. But it gets far more calculated than that. The United States now had by far the most powerful military in the world, as it was subsidized by previously printing money in excess of their own previous gold standard.
Keep in mind, by the way, I believe around this time would have been when Halliburton started to get big, that is basically the world's #1 source for oil drilling, fracking equipment. And they like survey the locations and do the setup for oil drilling, and they shut down and like pack up the rig afterwards and do all the aftercare to the area after a drilling project has been done. Halliburton has the monopoly on oil, and it operates a lot in the Middle East. Like if you want to, if you're in Saudi Arabia and you want to like drill oil, it's probably going to be with Halliburton equipment and with their guys coming to inspect the area, make sure the rig's doing well. And they're an American company, and they don't always pick up the rigs. That's true, Asmodeus Devil Luke, but they're supposed to. They are supposed to. And that's an American company. If you want to drill oil almost anywhere in the world, especially if you're especially if you're in the Middle East, I mean, you gotta work with Halliburton. That's how you get oil set up. And at that point, I mean, you're already working with America. Why not get on that US dollar? Why not, sell your oil to the US? See where this is going? Even with, like, there's many other aspects of this that helped America gain a sort of stranglehold on the world economy, that it's just so many reasons that even this guy who did a really good, well-researched video, even he can't touch on everything. I'm sure he'll bring up Halliburton at some point, but just off the top of my head, that's another example of how America just owns the world with oil. Because we have corporations that have monopolies on entire global industries. And that's just one example.
Standard, and the U.S. agreed to give the Saudi monarchy an ironclad security guarantee. The U.S. would provide cutting-edge military hardware, training, and an implicit promise that the American military would intervene and protect the Saudi royal family and their oil fields from any threat. And in return, the Saudis agreed to recycle their excess oil profits directly back into the U.S. economy by purchasing billions upon billions of dollars in U.S. Treasury bonds. And in this same decade, between 1970 and 1980, Saudi Arabia's GDP went from $4 billion to $164 billion. That's like earning $15 an hour at McDonald's, and within the next decade, earning $615 an hour at McDonald's. The GDP per capita in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE eclipsed the earnings of even the wealthy class of people in America and Europe. If you've ever watched footage showcasing insane, tacky levels of wealth in Dubai, now you know where that wealth originated. But for the context of this video, this creation of what is now called the petrodollar put America back on their chariot of...
That's a generalization. Dubai does have... There's very similar stories with a lot of other countries where we've got like a very powerful alliance through oil or because of oil. Like, correct me if I'm wrong. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Kuwait were also allies with, primarily not just because of military advantage in location, but because they've got oil too. And we've got we've literally we've fought wars to defend our oil interests with Kuwait, So it's very common. It's very, very common that the U.S. is like, hey, we'll take care of things around here if you just let us turn your country into our oil source. And I'm gonna be honest, it seems like it's smart to do, because Kuwait's another place where you get a lot of very wealthy people similar to this who come from like oil money, and yeah, a lot of those people will go to Dubai as well, like live the high life there. If you're from anywhere in Europe or the Middle East, or even throughout, I'm pretty sure even throughout like Northern Africa too, and you've got money, like money, seems like the thing to do is to go live in Dubai and to go like be in a penthouse.
Asymmetrical leverage, while the rest of the world would have to, cut down forests and mine materials and make shit to sell.
Kuwait is way nicer than Dubai, sure, but there's a lot of people from there that are wealthy that go move to Dubai. It's this immense amount of people go there with money to live that high life. Kuwait's not Dubai is not like, it doesn't have like a working class population that are living normal lives. You know what I mean? Like, it is a hyper wealthy, luxurious class and a slave class. Those are the two classes in Dubai, in the UAE.
On the side of bringing manufacturing back to the U.S., this may be the most important argument I'll ever have to give you. The aforementioned insane amounts of privilege from the gold standard and petrodollar allowed America to outsource most of the things that we don't feel like doing. Mining, drilling, refining, working long hours in a factory. Instead of pilfering our natural resources and letting it degrade our citizens' quality of life, we instead adjusted our ties and thought of ideas and intellectual property that other countries could make for us to consume. Like, try and conceptualize this. I live on land that has a whole lot of iron and pyrite on it. And then we have a small river with virtually unlimited water just down there. But I live in an economic reality with so much privilege that not once have I ever considered digging up these resources and selling them. I literally live on a farm. I don't grow plants to sell, and I literally give my chicken eggs away to friends and neighbors. And if I have a big surplus, I just throw
I mean, yeah, but as he's about to explain the surplus, though, they lay one a day, each hen.
them at a tree and then the chickens eat them. Let's just use copper production as an example, as it's pretty much available everywhere on Earth. In Congo, an average of 6.8 tons of copper is extracted or processed per square miles. In China, it's an average of 6.5 tons. In Mexico, it's 1.76 tons. But here in America, with our vast, enormous copper deposits, it's 12 pounds of copper processed per square mile. Instead, we import the majority of the copper we use from other places so we can keep our land looking pretty and our air smelling clean. So when I hear billionaires squawking about bringing
And hey, listen, there's benefits to that. I'm not gonna lie. If you've seen what mining has done to other countries and their landscapes, you're gonna probably not want that to be done to America's beautiful landscape if you're American. Because if you see a quarry on the side of a mountain while you're driving through, like, North Carolina, for instance, you'll immediately realize how much of an eyesore it is. When you really think about it, it's like, huh, I guess I do prefer if the mining is being done elsewhere. Look at Germany when they were mining all that coal with the giant excavator machines that would just turn large tracts of the German countryside into Mordor. Have y'all seen those photos? Apparently they stopped doing that, thank God. But it's crazy. Dude, for a while there, they were turning Germany into Mordor with mining coal. The coal industry is literally evil, and it must die. It must die. We do not need coal.
manufacturing and mining jobs back to the US and then advocating for the removal of immigrants who are willing to do those jobs, I think to myself, did they somehow miss the last 80 years of economic prosperity? Is it fucking possible that they don't understand how any of this works? Or is it entirely possible that they do understand how this works and the problem is actually that too many Americans are too comfortable? And that probably sounds crazy, but stick with me because first we need to philosophically understand leverage.
Leverage is a term frequently used by economists, although maybe not frequently enough. Studying leverage on an investment is about as fun as writing down thousands of metrics and using logistic regression to predict a fight instead of just betting against Jake Paul and then watching him get knocked unconscious and you winning $100 in the process. So you decide to rent a home in a small town where every house costs exactly $100,000 and you're saving up to buy one. I decided to move to the same town as well, but not just to live there. I'm going to try and make as much money as possible. I happen to have $100,000 in cash, so I buy a house. A year goes by, property value increases by 10%, and I sell the same house for $110,000, making 10% profit on my equity. But then I get a better idea. I take $100,000 from the sale of my house and use it as 5 $20,000 down payments on 5 houses. Another year of 10% value increase will earn me 50% return on investment. So why don't I do this in real life? Why don't I own dozens of properties? Well, because this isn't some sort of infinite money glitch, it's a high-risk maneuver. In fact, it's asymmetrical against me, because if those properties would lose 20% of their value before I sell them, then I would lose 100% of my investment and be broke. But there's a whole lot more to this. Long before George Soros was known for paying everybody in the world to be mean to Alex Jones and Donald Trump, he wrote a classic and important book called The Alchemy of Finance,
Soros.
which was published in 1987. This book introduced and popularized the theory of reflexivity, which is now arguably cited more in anthropology than it is in finance. Continuing with my pedantic little example here. As we all know, one of the few predictable things about housing markets is that they constantly fluctuate. And if I arrived to that town with millions or billions of dollars in capital to absorb the housing market losing value, I'd be able to tip the scales in a way where I'm not as exposed to the asymmetrical risk. If I buy enough of these houses in this little town, I'm actually not only contributing to the increase in the appraised property value, but I'm able to maneuver the local economy to my benefit. I could perform a little magic trick called the dividend recap. I could create a shadow company and then sell the houses to myself far below their actual value. Then when this causes comparable houses to be appraised at a lower value, I can buy them and rent them at higher prices until I create a housing shortage, which will then inflate the value for when I decide to sell them. By the way, none of
this is probably what you've heard referenced a lot, where it is more valuable for some property owners to keep their homes or apartments or units vacant than to actually rent them out, because then they can artificially drive up prices and create artificial scarcity. It manufacture higher demand. It's pretty fucked.
this is hypothetical. This is exactly what Blackstone did via Invitation Homes after the 2008 financial crisis.
And Blackstone, for example, is now the largest owner of individual houses in the United States. And then we're
S&P Automobile, does that still exist?
renting them to people
I've never
as
seen
opposed
that.
to selling them. It's a good business for us. It's a new thing, but it's also good for America. And it's good to be able to provide housing for those people who need it.
In fact, they built a highly sophisticated algorithm to scan real estate markets and intentionally overpaid for houses to price out families who wanted to live in them. Over the years, plenty of white papers commissioned by private equity firms openly detail these theories. They describe housing as a supply-constrained asset with inelastic demand that can systematically block the working class from building generational wealth through homeownership. Instead, this guarantees that workers' income can be siphoned back into Wall Street equity. In 2026, this is now commonplace in nearly every industry. Nearly every price tag you see is partially hypothetical, obfuscating the objective value that the commodity holds. The consumer sees a product, service, company, or rental property. Private equity sees a debt service. Let's visit another painful real-world example that you'll probably remember.
In 2004, Toys R Us and Babies R Us were profitable and due to the real estate holdings considered stable with a B+ rating by Standard & Poor.
Man, I remember when they shut down. That was like a big story back in the day. How many of you guys grew up in a post-Toys R Us world?
Financial flexibility was rated as adequate, but due to big box stores like Walmart and Target, they needed to make some changes to remain that way. But then, KKR, Bain Capital, and Vornado Realty Trust smelled their favorite type of blood and took the company private. It didn't exactly take a clairvoyant to see that Amazon was going to be another big threat to Toys R Us, as they had just launched a dedicated toy warehouse, but Toys R Us had about $100 million per year to reinvest into growing an e-commerce platform that could compete against or integrate with Amazon. But instead, they used that money to leverage more debt. So much debt that nobody with a calculator could ever imagine them being able to carry it. So much debt, in fact, that the interest rates were 4 times higher than the $100 million they would otherwise be using to reinvest in growth. This massive pile of borrowed money would pay for over $470 million in management fees and dividend recapitalizations, not revitalizing the business. That's because this private equity buyout was never about making Toys R Us more profitable or selling more toys. It was about using the company as a debt service. For a long 12 years, the store downsized. Employees were underpaid and eventually terminated. Buildings once associated with children's Christmas gifts, acting as anchor stores for entire malls, now rotted as they sat vacant. And it's worth noting that these same vampiric shitbags did the exact same thing to KB Toys, Gymboree, and Sports Authority. It's almost as if they have a fetish for stuff.
Sports Authority! Oh my god, I haven't seen that since I was like 11. Oh my god, that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. Is that what happened to Kmart too? Did Kmart get fucked by this?
Our child retail nostalgia. The transition from a growth-based economy to an authoritarian one is difficult when your life is part of it, but
I think I bought some of my very first equipment for swim team when I was younger at Sports Authority, come to think of it. That's kind of crazy to know they're shut down. Circuit City too?
this clears up when you zoom out over a period of years to examine the business models. It's a play that's not dissimilar to private equity's manipulation of the housing market, but instead of robbing your family of an opportunity to build generational wealth, it robs you of the opportunity to consume information freely. And of course, an incredible example of this would be AI, but I need to make an important disclaimer here. I'm not really big on anti-AI rants. AI is a broad term covering technology that has, for example, legitimately transformed medicine and healthcare research. It's also transformed how effectively insurance companies can deny claims for people who need life-saving treatment. And in a way, I'm not even talking about AI, but about the mechanism in which it's being used to exploit multiple industries and the world economy itself.
Last September, NVIDIA announced a $100 billion investment into OpenAI, which is a little weird as OpenAI, from their own optimistic projections, is on track to burn more cash than any company in history. But this starts to make a little more sense when you take into consideration that NVIDIA has monopolized the expensive hardware used in data centers, as OpenAI would be spending a whole lot of that investment buying NVIDIA GPUs. OpenAI spent investment on securing exclusive purchase.
And this is why it's $1,000 or more dollars more than usual to build a computer than it used to be.
Agreements with top memory component suppliers like Samsung, cornering as much as 40% of global DRAM production capacity, which has now made it effectively impossible for consumers and small businesses to buy or build computers that could use AI locally. And it's nearly impossible to even buy new high-speed
You're priced out. You're priced out. Gotta hate big tech? Me too.
Drives to store large amounts of data. This has caused major problems in the video game industry, as even titans like Sony and Microsoft are considering delaying console launches due to unreasonable production costs and limitations, which then gets even more absurd when you consider that Microsoft holds a 27% equity stake in OpenAI's for-profit arm.
The AI bubble needs to pop, and it needs to pop soon. I'm happy that AI is making strides in areas where it's good that it's making strides in, like medicine, but this whole consumer-grade generative AI thing needs to go away. The only level of consumer AI I have any respect for is the text-based stuff that, like, you know, like Gemini. I'm not a big fan of how it's shoved down our throats, but I have found Gemini useful on occasion, primarily because you can't just disable it. It generates a result whether you like it or not and puts it at the top of your thing. And sometimes it's a really good output it gives you, and you're like, whoa, that's exactly what I needed to know. And there's a link to where it's sourcing it. Yep, that source is legit. Cool. And I do think there's a downside in that it's probably going to train people to do a lot less of their own thinking and their own research. But I'm not going to lie, it's never been easier to debunk misinfo spread by conservatives. Like, I can do that shit lickety-split now using Gemini. Hate on me if you want to, but I appreciate the speed.
Valued at $135 billion. In that same month as NVIDIA's OpenAI deal, they paid $6.3 billion to purchase CoreWeave's unsold data center capacity through 2032, despite owning 7% of the company at the time and being their GPU supplier. Obviously, at this point, no visualization could possibly describe this clusterfuck, and I'm just using them because it's funny. Simply calling this an AI bubble is far too forgiving. This is, in the opinion of many economists, unprecedented and rampant investment fraud. I'm sure this isn't news to any of my viewers, but Google has deprioritized its functionality as a search engine and replaced your experience with Gemini. I suppose to an extremely optimistic user, this is an evolution of a search engine. Now, instead of having to look around and sort through important context, you are instead served an answer to your question whether you desire this feature or not. Here's an example.
There you go. Yep. Whether you like it or not, it generates a result.
We just tested this on the first try. Yesterday, The Verge published a short interview with me where I was asked, what is your happy place online? So let's just skip the chore of reading an article and ask Google. It turns out that my happy place online is a VR game for MetaQuest called Walkabout Mini Golf, which is weird.
You know what's really funny? If you say, that's not true, you're wrong, in response to Gemini's, wrong answer, it'll say, wait, you're right, my bad. And then it'll correct itself, and usually it'll get it right after correcting itself, and that's interesting. Sometimes you have to call it out. That's the thing about it. You can't just fully trust these AI text things. Like, they hallucinate and they get things wrong, and they want to get an answer for you even if there isn't one.
Because I have no idea what the fuck that is. This is because Gemini has confused me with Roger Lynn, the creator of the MPC drum machine. My actual answer to this question was a free music programming language called Strudel, and this information is literally in the metadata of the first link in the actual Google search. There are some differences between my actual life and my Gemini life. Gemini claims that I married some lady named Jackie in 2021, and approximately 7 years ago I started bleaching my eyebrows platinum blonde to match my hair. Then I switched to shaving after reading about the chemicals in the dye. But I now really like having no eyebrows because it allows my eyes and lips to stand out more. This is all innocent and amusing, until it's not. In 2025, Hassan Piker was viewing one of my videos on a stream, and someone in the chat speculated on my stance on Israel.
Oh no, bro. You know Hassan went nuclear on him if he thought he was pro-Israel. Oh no.
Stop. You guys are... No. I don't...
Please, Hassan.
I don't want to believe it. Shut up. You're lying.
The following day...
Thank God. Okay, he didn't crash out. He actually had a very reasonable reaction to that. I'm proud of him.
I had received a ton of messages expressing disappointment for me having made a video detailing my support for Israel after taking a trip there to interview IDF soldiers. The problem with this is, I've never been to Israel in my life. In fact, decades ago, when on tour in the region, I would intentionally avoid Israel due to the apartheid condition. And I've repeatedly...
So it was AI generated entirely?
Been both a vocal and financial supporter of Palestinian statehood for the length of my public presence on the internet. But Google's Gemini was, for some reason, mixing me up with the Newsmax reporter who I share virtually nothing in common with, and then prioritizing that absurd level of misinformation over the actual search results. Even after multiple news outlets covered and published Gemini's monumental fuck-up in detail, searching Ben Jordan Israel didn't bother.
There's a company that's suing, or somebody is suing Google right now over its AI results being false about them. So yeah, Google is getting sued as we speak by multiple people for their AI overview results, essentially slandering public figures with random results, some of them really negative, that it'll just make up about people or just pull its source from some Reddit page, right? And if Google is putting that response at the top of Google search results about you, that's basically Google telling people that's the truth. And so, yeah, right now, Google is having a rough time in court over that because they have no ground to stand on to make excuses for how this isn't Google slandering anybody that this little AI overview lies about. I wouldn't be surprised if in a very near Gemini update, they don't allow you to ask about people anymore, which would make it near useless.
Identifying that Gemini itself caused this problem and claimed that I had addressed it over a year before it even happened. So right now you're probably thinking, why is this guy not literally suing Google right now? In the case of Robbie Starbuck,
guys, I did not pre-watch. I'm telling, I didn't pre-watch. But yeah, there are multiple people. I don't even think this is the guy I'm thinking of, but there are multiple people suing Google over this.
Gemini had wrongfully claimed was a sexual predator, Google's defense in a request to dismiss his lawsuit called the case
That's
misleading
serious.
because there was no evidence that anyone didn't know that they were hallucinations. They even went to the extent of accusing him of misusing the platform to create the AI hallucinations as evidence because they weren't technically documented or immediately reproducible. These are not rare glitches. These types of hallucinations happen a lot, almost the majority of the time. Last October, the BBC and European Broadcasting Union published a study that showed that 45% of AI news queries produced, and I quote, erroneous answers. This is an enormous problem and liability that breaks the very thing that these AI models are supposed to be doing. These companies are enormous multi-billion-dollar conglomerates with strategists and economists and massive legal teams, so why in the world would this profoundly and confidently unreliable technology not only be recklessly prioritized, but forced on users of virtually every major technical platform? Because it's clearly intellectual property theft. The Verge paid Terrence O'Brien to reach out to my manager and set up an interview and then write a short.
Well, the entire thing with these AI programs, the generative AI, is it's entirely trained off of other people's work. I saw someone try to strawman that point the other day by saying, do people still think that AI data centers just steal a bunch of pictures of cat PNGs and then post one of the cat PNGs when someone asks for one? Like, that's their strawman of the, not argument, but factual point that generative AI is trained off of pre-existing work and then pulls that data to generate a conglomeration of other people's work. But of course, if you just call it saving cat PNGs and then sending a cat PNG when someone asks for one with a prompt, then you can really make the people who are against AI or Gen AI sound real silly, huh? But we're not going to watch the rest of this because I don't want to just yoink his entire video, but if you want to watch the rest, there'll be a link down below in the description. I thought it was very good from what I've seen. Big fan so far of what I've seen of this channel. And if you enjoyed this video, then leave a like, subscribe, ring the bell icon, turn on all notifications, and comment down below. It really helps a ton, and I hope to see you in the next video.